This is Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Dill. It is Tuesday, January 20th. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio and happy to have with me today again as a guest, Lisa Simeone. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
It's been a long time. Thank you, Cynthia. I was just thinking, we last did one of these when I got back from my trip. So I got off the QM2 and it was a fashion. It was not politics. It was a fashion conversation. That was back in November. Is that right? Was it
I
before
think that's right.
Thanksgiving or after It was somewhere in November.
But that show made an impression on
It's
me,
been a
though.
long time.
Um,
Yeah.
the conversation we had about fashion made an impression. Like, for instance, when I saw today that Valentino died, I thought of you. But today, what we're going to talk about,
Yeah. Yeah. Another legend. Another legend.
and I don't know, but just as an aside, do you see any new fashion icons on the horizon that will ever replace these giants?
Oh, God. Now I'm on the spot. Well, no, not yet. I mean, it doesn't mean there can't be. For instance, if Alexander McQueen had not offed himself, he would have been someone. He definitely would have. I think I would have put him up there as legendary, as that height. John Galliano is the closest one I can think of. He's much older than Alexander McQueen was, but John Galliano is also a major star. However, that's if you already are into fashion. It's not going to be like people just knew the name Valentino, like whether they paid attention to his clothes or not, they knew that name. So I don't see anybody on the horizon or waiting in the wings who's like that. No, I can't say that I do.
There'll probably be, I mean, right, there's gonna be a Melania fashion line, I'm sure, after the movie. But we're gonna talk about
See that face I just made, that's going to be the splash page when you put the YouTube up. That's what YouTube, it gets the most, oh God, it gets the most hideous thing. And that crazy face I just made is going to be the splash page. But anyway, yeah.
maybe the algorithm loves that face of yours. Maybe that's why.
Maybe. Yeah,
Well,
Melania.
we can't talk about anything really without talking about Trump, and we'll sort of get to Trump, I think, in this conversation. But let's start by a recap of a recap. Last week, the Supreme Court, I think, as a lot of people who follow me and follow you and follow this issue on transgender craziness. Last week, of course, the Supreme Court had the two oral arguments down in DC. There was a big rally. There was a lot of talk about that. The two cases out of Idaho and West Virginia, and that everyone's sort of speculating that there's going to be a decision out of the Supreme Court that supports generally our position on protecting sex-based rights. We'll see. But last night you had some kind of rock stars in this arena on a Diag X space conversation program that I listened to. I thought it was very, very interesting. I had, of course, know Kara Dansky, but I didn't know the other two women. So just tell listeners what you did last night, and then I'll ask you some questions about it.
Okay, so last night we had an X space, this thing that it's like Zoom, except it's not Zoom, it's just audio, it's not video on X for DIAG, Democrats for an Informed Approach to Gender. And we do these semi-regularly. So we had on, you mentioned Kara Dansky, who's a lawyer and a self-proclaimed radical feminist, a book author. And then we had on Elspeth Cipher, who is a retired justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Court. And we also had Nancy Hogshead, who's a former Olympian. She won gold and silver in the 1984 Olympics. She's a swimming athlete, and now she's a lawyer as well. So those were our three main people. And we talked about, you're a lawyer, so you can explain the legalese and you understand the ins and outs of these cases. But basically, they explained what's at stake and what Little versus Hecox, which is the Idaho case, and West Virginia versus BPJ, what they mean and what they portend for women's rights and girls' rights in sports. And specifically, these things are about sports. I mean, I'm not an athlete, but I care that girls and women should have an equal playing field and not be run over and injured and bested by hulking males who have no business to be on that field with them. So this is specifically, these cases are specifically about sports.
Well, I think anyone who's concerned with sex-based rights, I think sports is such a great topic to focus on because, you know, it is a competition of bodies, and it gets to the nut of the issue, which is, are women real? Are we separate from men?
Oh,
And is it fair
getting,
to have
getting
categories? Are you hearing me?
You're going
Uh-oh.
in and out, but I think I got the gist of what you said. There's some, what do you call that? It's not called stammering or stuttering whenever it does that. Anyway, yeah, sports is I think it's a good way for people to get into this topic if they don't really understand what's at stake, or they've just been very, oh, who cares? Trans people, let them be, and it's wonderful, and they're love and kumbaya and all that shit. When you say to them, do you realize that men are harming women on the field? I mean, physically harming them, but also stealing their honors, their opportunities, their scholarship money. And what's great is Mariah Burton Nelson, who's another athlete. She wasn't on with us last night, but she was on the pregame before the Supreme Court hearings, oral arguments. And like Mariah has done a calculation. There's no hard and fast numbers for this. These are just estimates. But for every guy who takes the place of a girl or a woman on a team, there are all these downstream effects. There are all these knock-on effects. And she's
Sure.
calculated, basically multiply that by 250. 250 other girls or women get displaced by this one guy. And she went through the whole formula, which I'm not going to go into here. It doesn't matter.
Uh-oh, now you froze. I don't know what happens. Maybe there's an
Yeah,
internet.
I know should I repeat that? Men and boys are taking honors and opportunities and scholarship money away from women and girls.
Yes, and it's been
That's the
studied,
gist.
and it seemed like the panel, and just generally people who have weighed in, expect the Supreme Court to say in response to these 2 cases that, yes, states can regulate sports, and states may have single sex, teams, which is a victory, but it feels hollow because it doesn't
Well,
get to really what we care about, which is society being captured by a gender ideology that fails to recognize the material reality of sex. So I'm wondering, did you listen to the oral arguments in
I did.
preparation? Yeah, me
I
too. And
did.
so I don't know about you, but I was just like really kind of disappointed in the banter between the justices and the lawyers, and the fact that nobody really got to some fundamental questions like, why are we talking about this BJ, you know,
BPJ, Becky,
pe-
quote unquote, Becky Pepper Jackson, who's a boy.
just assuming that this denying this kid of puberty somehow is like, well, he was, he has a constitutional right, because he has blocked puberty. It's like, nobody even said how
Horrifying.
crazy it's horrifying, like, okay, we
It
have
is. I
children who are
mean,
blocking so what was your takeaway first from the arguments when you just listened to them with your, layman's and, art ear?
yeah, that's the thing. There was so much legalese and technical jargon that I didn't get, and I would like tune out even though I was listening. But you're right, there was no actual definition of terms. I mean, I think this is basic when you're doing an argument of any kind in life, whether it's philosophy or politics or mathematics or whatever. You have to define your terms. And nobody would define sex, and nobody would define transgender or gender identity. It's just assumed that we all know what that is. Well, we disagree about what those things mean.
Yeah,
Clearly, some
exactly.
people are saying that they're interchangeable, that biological sex and gender identity are interchangeable, which is a crock of shit. But for those who believe that, we need to define our terms. And nobody wanted to do that. The lawyers, like, they definitely stayed away from that. The lawyers stayed away from that. The justices stayed away. Although Alito did ask, I guess it was Kathleen Hartnett, who was arguing, who's pro-trans, rah-rah trans. He asked her, well, what do you mean by a boy or a girl? What exactly is that? What is the biological reality? What is sex? And she just stumbled and stammered and didn't want to get into it. Although she did say, I love this. You talk about self-contradiction. She did say, BPJ, Becky, quote, Becky Pepper Jackson, was a natal male. He's born a boy, he's born a male, but she, blah, 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 blah. And she, Dottie, you've just
Yeah.
told us that he's a boy, and now you're referring to him as she. It's like crazy town. It's so
And
self-contradictory.
I was, and you and the panelists last night talked about this a little bit too, the importance of language and just the sort of acceptance of these terms that are really in the everyday life are really being fought over, like cis. Like, I really resent
Sis,
being called a cis woman, and I resent the idea
agreed.
that the Supreme Court just accepts that you and I are okay being somehow now called cis women without our consent. It's like, no, that's
I
not my
do
gender
think
identity.
I do think though that some of the justices, and we did get into this a bit last night, I think it's sometimes I don't want to read too much into that because I think sometimes it's for convenience sake. I think clearly Sotomayor, Brown Jackson, and Kagan do believe in that terminology, do use it genuinely and sincerely, and think that we're cis and they're cis and other people are trans. But when any of the other justices use it, I think it's just purely for convenience and we shouldn't read anything into it. Like Amy Coney Barrett said it a couple of times, cisgender. Okay, but that's just, it just made it easier in the moment in that conversation. I don't think that that necessarily means she's on their side and not on our side. So I
I
would
don't
just be
know. Yeah.
careful about reading too much into that.
Maybe I agree is in terms of which side is she on. She's probably sympathetic with our side in the sense that women are real and separate. But I think using the language and the terms cisgender is a purposeful tactic by trans activists to try to normalize their state of being, their disassociation between body and mind. They want to everyone to believe that if you have a gender identity that's different from your biological sex, that it's perfectly normal, and if you're a cis woman, well, that's just as opposed to being a trans woman, and both of the two are the same. And I just think it's so important to not equalize so-called trans women
Yes.
and women. But setting that all aside, the question, I guess, for the court, like we said, is are states permitted to do it? But you asked a question that I think is really um, the crux of the issue for a lot of people. And that is, even if we get this victory from the Supreme Court, where there's 6-3 decision saying that these red states can separate boys and girls in sports, rah, rah. But in the states that are fighting this out in the legislatures, it's going to come down to whether or not Trump, behind the women and girls who are fighting for, sex-based rights, the fact that Trump's hands are all over it, if that's gonna ultimately, be an Achilles heel. And so, I mean, obviously the justice last night, and
I think
doesn't
it
get too into the politics, but what do you think?
I think it makes it harder for us. There's no question because we loathe Trump. We that isn't even a strong enough word. This guy is destroying the country and now trying to destroy the world order. So we hate everything he stands for. And I don't for a minute believe that he cares about women and girls. He took an opportunity. He's an opportunist. He took an opportunity that provided by the Democrats. They handed it to him on a silver frickin' platter because they're so stupid about this issue. And so he took that and ran with it. And so he, with his executive order, protected women and girls. The irony of this supreme misogynist protecting women and girls, and yet he did it. Not because he gives a shit, not because he cares. He saw an opportunity. But the fact is, this executive order is protecting women and girls. And so it's just making our job harder because people knee jerk, unthinkingly, automatically say to us, oh, so you support Trump. Oh, you must be an extreme right winger and all this bullshit because they're unable to think critically. They're unable to detach their tribalism from a particular specific political issue or a topic. It's all tribalism all the time. And so the fact that he made these executive orders on DEI and on quote unquote gender, which I think were correct, but that makes our job harder. It really does because liberals are just, and we're liberal, other liberals are just digging in their heels.
Yeah.
They're just
I
digging in their
actually
heels. And so it's not going
Lisa,
to help us in the long run.
I don't know if I'm a liberal anymore, to tell you the truth. And I say that as somebody who was a, progressive Democratic candidate, state senator. I was a candidate endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I was a patient of Planned Parenthood when I was in college. I protested, I was a national delegate to the Democratic convention twice, served in the state Senate in Maine as a Democrat in this House of Representatives. I'm not a Democrat anymore because of this issue, but I don't even know if I'm a liberal anymore because I can't get my arms around any arguments that liberals are making. I can't understand. Like, for instance, the women's lobby today in Maine, posted this thing about how they are just pro trans because even wrote it down. They said, we aren't threatened by promoting freedom of gender expression and body autonomy for all people. These are women's organizations and these are the liberal organizations who they they can't separate any of this identity politics. So I think going into the midterm elections, if the economy is on a trajectory that, like right now, is not that great for most Americans, and the ICE immigration thugs are in the streets, separating families and terrorizing communities, that people are going to be like, you know what, we don't really care about this issue, because it seems like when it comes to women's issues, people don't really care that much. I mean, it really
Yeah,
does.
I have to say, I refuse to allow.
Oh, I lost you again. You refuse to allow. Uh-oh, you just
Wait,
got
hang on, am I
silenced.
back? Okay.
Yeah,
So I refuse to allow these groups, such as the one you just mentioned, the Women's Union in Maine. I refuse to allow these people who are profoundly illiberal. I don't care that they call themselves liberals. I refuse to allow them to subvert the meaning of liberal and to take it over. I will not allow that. I am a classical liberal. I believe in the principles of the Enlightenment, which is what classic liberal principles are. And I refuse to allow these people to ruin that or to take over that term and twist it and distort it and change it. I'm still a proud liberal, but they aren't. I don't care that they call themselves liberal. They're wrong. They're illiberal and they're wrong. And I don't give a shit. And that's another thing. The whole, these terms, conservative, liberal, and right and left, really don't even make any sense anymore.
no,
It's,
they
it's,
don't.
yeah, it's take an individual issue and tell me where you stand on that. I don't care what your tribe says. It's meaningless what your tribe says. Think for yourself. And that's what being a true liberal principles mean. People have freedom to do what they want as long as they don't fuck with anybody else. I mean, that's basically it. So if a guy wants to wear fishnets, take your fetish and prance around at home, and even prance around in the grocery store, because there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to police your clothing. That's a whole nother subject. I think you're twisted, but fine. You're not coming into my bathroom. I don't really give a flying fuck if you want to wear fishnets and
Right.
lipstick. You look like an idiot, but that's your right. And as a liberal, I believe that's your right. But you don't have the right to invade women's single sex spaces. I don't see why this is so hard to understand. I really
I think
don't.
I think because people like conflate the issues of expression and access. Like you just said, I think most people agree under the First Amendment, everybody has the right to express themselves however they want. Wear a tutu, wear a jog bra. But when it comes to access, there's nothing discriminatory about having categories. And categories based on biology are perfectly appropriate. Like we have categories based on age, we have categories based on
On
so
weight,
many
in weight
things. Yeah, on
classes.
weight. I
Wait,
mean,
well,
just
that's probably next on the chopping block. You got to let everybody. No, that's a humorous aside. Anyway, yeah, we have separate categories. Exactly.
well, I think Trump, though, is not alone. He has, I think, a majority of conservative Republicans as well as moderate Republicans here in Maine. All eyes are on Maine in the upcoming election, because not only do we have a governor's race that's open in a state that has like a very rural conservative north and liberal south, but our U.S. Senator Susan Collins, as I'm sure you are aware, is up for reelection, and Trump is opposed to her because she stood up to Trump. She
Yes.
is on our side when it comes to this issue and has signed the petition to protect girls' sports. And she, in my view, is what a lot of people are looking for, which is a conservative in the sense of like, let's conserve, what's good in American culture, including Title IX and the rights of women and girls. But this issue of women's rights, I mean, I think it's going to be a decisive factor, but I,
It's
we'll
hard
see.
to
And
tell. It's hard to tell at this point. And you mentioned the ICE thugs in Minneapolis and in other cities, but Minneapolis is the sort of the locus of it right now. I agree 100% that well, it is more important in my view. It's like it's overridingly important what's going on in Minneapolis and these other cities with ICE thugs running rampant, completely lawless, criminally attacking people, assaulting people. We haven't even mentioned the sexual assaults, which I'm sure are going on in spades. I am sure of it. I've only seen evidence of 2 cases, but that's because we're not in private with these guys when they're assaulting these women. So I do think this is overridingly important. That doesn't mean, though, that I can't hold more than one thought in my head at a time. And women make up 50% of the population. And I think we are important. I think 50% of the population counts for something. And when we have an entire cadre of lunatics denying biological reality, yeah, I think that's an important thing. I do think that's important. It's not more important than what's going on in Minneapolis, but it is still important. And don't you also, I meant to ask you this, don't you also have, I might be getting you mixed up with Massachusetts, but I think it's in Maine. Don't you have a veteran, a guy, a man, a strong veteran who's running for governor in Maine too?
Well, no, we have a guy, a man who with a low, strong voice, who's a veteran running for United States Senate against Susan Collins. So there's two
Ah,
Democrats in the primary.
okay.
One is our governor, Janet Mills, who is famous now for saying, "I'll see you in court" to Trump about
Right,
this issue.
right.
But she is actually, in her past, a real defender of women's rights. She was the first woman DA, the first woman governor, first woman attorney general. But she unfortunately has sort of got herself boxed in on this gender ideology issue. But in the UN, and so in the U.S. Senate race, she's a primary candidate, and then she's fighting against this guy Graham Plattner, who
That's
has.
it. Plattner.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of Graham Plattner personally.
Yeah.
I don't think you have accidentally a tattoo on your chest for over 20 years that's a Nazi symbol and not know it. And he is just, he's gotten like, he's a big Bernie Sanders accolade, and Bernie has been, and I don't buy it. I think he's a, a newcomer who should maybe get, Sosamotes at the town or local level, but to replace Susan Collins with this Yahoo oyster
Yeah.
farmer, forget it. I mean, so I have a feeling Susan Collins is going to be reelected to the United States Senator, and I'm glad because she is on our side when it comes to protecting the integrity of sex-based rights, and she has stood up to the Trump administration. And I'm not as opposed to the Trump administration, I think, as you are. Like, I definitely am opposed to this thuggery, but what bothers me the most about the Trump administration, of all the odious things, and there are several, a lot of them, but I didn't vote for Trump, so it's not my fault. So I'm just observing this. But of all the odious things that he's done, it's forgiven and given pardons to these criminals. That to me is the most disgusting thing. So I'm glad that I think he deep down does care about girls' sports. He's got kids and grandkids who are athletes and understands it. Maybe not. Maybe it's
He
totally.
cares about himself, Cynthia. He cares about
Yeah, you
himself.
know, it it's true. He's totally expedient. I mean, he is transactional in every sense of the word, and if probably supporting women's rights is maybe transactional. Although he's kind of this weird, he's now all of a sudden pro-life and protecting girls. So
It's whichever way the wind is blowing. You know,
but
you mentioned Janet Mills, and you said that in the past she's always been strong for women's rights, and I'm sure she is in some ways now. But it reminded me of Ketanji Brown Jackson and uh, why can't I think of their first names? Kagan
Sonia
and Sotomayor.
Sotomayor, oh, Elena Kagan,
Yes, yeah, Elena Kagan and what's Sotomayor's first name? I can't remember.
Sonia.
Anyway, Sonia Sotomayor. So here we have these three strong liberal women on the Supreme Court, and they're not standing up for women. What kind of cognitive dissonance is going on there that they think do they think it's okay that see they don't have to risk this. They can go to their private bathrooms in the Supreme Court. They don't have to worry about what if they go to a museum and walk into a women's restroom and they see some 6'2" guy there in a skirt and lipstick who's threatening or who's predatory, or who just wants to look up their skirts. Don't they think about this?
I know.
These women, it's very I don't it's so depressing to know that these women are on the court and they're not standing up for us. And that
I know.
otherwise that you have Amy Coney Barrett, who's, politically in general, we were not on the same side, but she's the one standing up for women. What is going on in this? And Alito and Kavanaugh? I mean, we are really in bizarro world. Kavanaugh, whom I didn't want to be approved or confirmed, rather, for the Supreme Court, he's the one in those oral arguments last week defending girls and women. He's the one saying, well, I actually coach my daughter's basketball league or team, and it's important that girls have their own separate sports category and don't have to compete with boys. Why, Democrats, you stupid frickin' Democrats, why are you letting Kavanaugh and Republicans take the high ground, take the high road on this? Why? But
It
they're I don't know how to get through to them anymore. I really don't, because I've written to my representatives so many times, and they just don't get it. They just don't get it. I don't know what to do anymore except
Well, I think what
rage.
you're doing with Diag, though, yeah, but Diag, I think, is really making some headway in influencing people, because what I found is when I'm
Oh,
constantly banging the drum here in Maine, because now, we have these stupid gender identity laws that snuck in, and we're seeing real harm, played out. So I'm constantly banging the drum, and often people will say, "Have you heard of this group Diag?" I'll be like, "Yes, I have."
oh,
So
I'm
what?
glad
So
to
I
hear
think,
that.
yeah, I think you're making a difference. What's coming up? Anything else on the horizon for in terms of the Diag X Spaces? Are you going to be hosting anything else soon?
Yes, we have a few things in the hopper. One which I think is going to be really important about the indoctrination that's going on in schools with little kids. I mean,
Oh,
teaching children that, I mean, really young children, that you're not really a boy or a girl. And you talk about the way to fuck with their heads. You could be anything you want to be. You're not really a boy or a girl. You might be, I don't know what, you might be non-binary, whatever the hell that means. You might be the opposite sex, or they don't use the word sex. It is, this
it's
is
crazy.
literally, it's indoctrination. And people don't realize it's not just one or two or three or four or five schools, although even if it were, that would be bad enough. This is going on all over the country. It is really fucking scary. We're going to
It's
have an
very scary.
entire generation of screwed up kids who don't know which end is up because they've been indoctrinated this way. I mean, this is like Soviet style propaganda, frankly. This is propaganda that the so-called left, so-called liberals, those of you who think you are and you're not, so-called liberals are in favor of this. So we're going to
That
have a dyad conversation about that.
your panelists last night, I think, I forget who it was who said, they oh, it was, Hogshead, who said,
Nancy Hogshead,
"Sexism."
yeah.
Yeah, "Sexism and misogyny are profound forces that manifest in different ways, and the new way that we're seeing it is playing out in this so-called transgender rights issue, and people, believing falsely that they're in a civil rights crusade, when really it just boils down to men
That's right. We're supposed to
erasing women's
prioritize.
rights.
That's right. We're expected to prioritize men, and not all men by any, not even
Right.
most men, very few men. We're supposed to prioritize the feelings, the feels, as they say online, the feelings of a small group of entitled predatory men, and some of them are delusional, and some of them are really twisted and sick and criminal. We're supposed to prioritize their feelings over reality, over biological reality, and over the rights of women and girls. We're just supposed to take a back seat and be quiet and shut up and let these poor deluded men, oh, these poor trans people, just want to live their lives. If that were true, we wouldn't need this conversation. They're not trying to just live their lives. They are trying to invade women's spaces. That's what's going on. This is not a civil rights issue. But
And
you said the
they're
magic
giving an
words when you say
invitation. They're giving an invitation, really, to invade
to
women's spaces.
predators.
Like, well, and I just think, like you talked about entitlement. I think there's a lot of entitlement going on here. Like Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was lamenting the fact that a poor boy can't play sports with someone who, his gender identity. Well, the same, girls have to
Play
play.
sports with the boys. Nobody's
Right, you
stopping
can
you from playing
express
sports with the
yourself
boys.
to your heart's content, and it's time, as your panelists said last night, for the men to accept and provide safety and acceptance to the other men who wanna express themselves as women, and they can use the men's room and be safe, hopefully, and secure. But this idea that women are supposed to take second fiddle and just, you know, accept that we are the equivalent of men with gender dysphoria is so unfair, and it's so disappointing to see the women liberal justices, as you said, really just cave. It's shocking to me, actually, and it really, I think, I don't know, makes it so apparent how political the Supreme Court is, and all these judicial nominations. I know that probably sounds so silly for somebody like myself who's been practicing law for 35 years. I've known, of course, the importance of the confirmation of Supreme Court justices, but you really, Justice Kavanaugh really does get this issue. And a lot of women came to his defense despite his horrible, drama of a confirmation hearing and
Right.
allegations against him. And it was so gross and tawdry and but whatever. He judges matter, their ideology and philosophy matter, and I don't know if anyone would have thought for a minute when questioning the credentials of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, if they would have thought to ask her, "So, Judge, do you agree that women are different than men and that sex-based rights are real?" I mean, you just
Well,
don't think to ask these questions.
wait, in her confirmation hearing, she was actually asked, I forget by which
Oh,
senator,
she
she
said,
was
that's right.
asked, what is a woman? And she said, I can't say because I'm not a biologist. Oh, I can't say. What, you know what? What is this? This piece, is it a piece of paper? I don't know because I'm not a geologist or I'm not a, I don't know what. I mean, what is this rock over here? Is it a rock? Well, I don't know if it's a rock. Maybe it's a marshmallow. I don't know because I'm not a geologist. She said she couldn't answer because she was not a biologist.
But
I,
where was
I
the outrage on the part of the liberals who supported her?
well,
Like, I
yeah,
mean, come on.
because they were just jumping up and down and saying it's a gotcha
It's
question.
the
It's a
first no, because
gotcha.
it's the first Black woman, who is gonna serve on the Supreme Court. It's more identity politics, just,
Right.
like, somehow clouding people's ability to, like, analyze clearly what she said. She can't say if women are real
Yeah.
because she's not a biologist.
Right.
Well, so the next diag thing, that's going to be again sort of related to Maine because we're being sued and we're suing the United States government around these issues, both when it comes to sports and when it comes to education. Because in Maine, a young girl was given like a chest binder and transitioned without her parents' consent. She was 13 years old, and so the
Horrifying.
parents are, you know, brought a
Horrifying.
yeah, it is horrifying.
People
It
talk about Sharia law in very strict Orthodox Muslim countries. This is a different kind of Sharia. This is like the trans Sharia or the trans Taliban. A young girl, you're flattening and binding her breasts. I mean, why not bind her feet like the Chinese did 200 years ago? What's the difference? How are we
yeah.
supposed to approve of this? Cynthia, I don't know. I despair. I know that many people think the tide is turning, and some of the people on the panel last night, some of the women were saying they think the tide is turning. I don't know because clearly the tide turned a long time ago in our favor amongst the general public. That's not in question. The question is the tide has just, it's been a tsunami of disinformation that has taken over all the political organs and social organs of our culture. That's the problem. It's very few people who have pushed this and it has taken over the whole culture, not because most Americans were in favor of it, but because it's just been shoved down our throats. So
Well,
I,
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of despair. I don't know.
Well, it's a trickle down theory. The only thing that kind of keeps me a little bit optimistic that things will really change is that it's all a big, this is a trickle down like position from,
Phenomenon.
the Democrats. They're the ones that launched this issue, and a lot of their big fundraising came in, around this issue. And then all the Democratic parties, they're very tribal, and so gender identity is now a Democratic priority, and so that gets sent out to all the parties, the local groups, all the ACLU, this, that, and the other thing. But you know what? If they lose elections, these same people who are running things in the party who think this is a winning issue, they have to lose elections to get this turned around. And I hope that people can focus on this issue when it comes to candidates, because, if all people worried about are ICE and the takeover of Greenland, women are going to suffer if more Democrats who don't believe in the reality of women get elected. So I hope Diag keeps up its good work. I could listen to Kara Dansky all day long.
I know. She is great and she can really distill an argument and explain it in plain English because I certainly am struggling with the legalese always, and she can explain it and nail it down, and she speaks slowly, not like me like a machine gun. She speaks very slowly and deliberately, and she's very careful, and so I agree. She's great. She's great. Yeah.
Who do you know who the panelists are going to be for the Diag conversation around education and indoctrination of gender ideology in schools?
I do not, and I have it written down on my calendar, and I don't even remember the date, let alone who the main event person is. So I'm sorry. I think it's I don't want to give a name. I think it's Anita Bartholomew, but that might be coming later. So I'm sorry. I just don't remember. It'll be on Diag's website though, and Diag's Substack as well.
Well, maybe you can
Yeah.
put it, if you think of it, put it in the comments. Well, Lisa Simeone, is there anything else, your takeaway from your listening to the Supreme Court or having those panelists last night that you want to share? Any afterthoughts
Just
or?
I mean, I think we covered it in this conversation. We just have to wait and see what the court decides and really what the numbers are when the court does make its decision in June. We expect this to be in June, and who knows what's going to be happening between now and then. Who knows if this maniac will still be in the White House even by then. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not making any predictions, but we have to wait until June to see what happens. And please, people, make up your minds based on the evidence and based on the importance of the issue, not on the personalities on the court.
Right, right. Just one more thing I just remembered that I wanted to talk to you about really briefly, and that is I can't believe that the lawyers for the the Idaho guy who wants to, like, after 5 years of litigating this
Lindsay
case.
Hecox.
Yeah,
Lindsay
he wants
Hecox.
to just
He wants to
dismiss.
drop it.
I, I
He wants
I
to.
mean, I find
He,
that offensive.
well,
Like when you kid.
it's
What
the
a
ace.
waste.
This is a bigger story, so we don't have time to get all into it. There are those in lawyers who believe that the ACLU pushed this, and he didn't want to bring a lawsuit, or rather, he didn't want to be involved in this, but they pushed it because they saw this as an opportunity for the ACLU. And so when he was like, you talked me into this to begin with, and
Wow. If that's, we just lost you, Lisa. If that's the case, that is even more evidence of the invidiousness of this transgender ideology. I mean, that's
yeah.
crazy if they're pressuring people into litigation and pressuring kids into surgery.
Yeah, there's some yeah, this is the talk amongst, I'm not going to mention any names, but amongst certain lawyers who have followed this very closely, that this is the ACLU's fault, and now the ACLU wishes it were not involved because they know they're going to lose. So
Well, Lisa Simeone, thanks so much for joining the show, and I can't wait to listen again to your next X Space Diag chat. They're really fun, and like I said, we'll try to put it in the comments, the next one, if people want to tune in.
okay, will do. Bye,
Okay,
Cynthia. Next time.
take care.